Go ahead and turn to 1 Samuel chapter 9, 1 Samuel 9. We're going to be going through 1 Samuel 9 and 10 today. We'll be bouncing around just reading a few verses from each. But if you start off in chapter 9, verse 1, and we'll be going from there. 1 Samuel 9, verse 1. We'll be going through chapter 10. Turn there, I ask you a question, like we usually do. How many of you love comparisons? Probably not, right? And you let me clarify that. Well, don't you love it when people try to compare you to somebody else? Right? That's kind of a bummer. People love to do it all the time. I hate comparisons. That must never work. Why? Because people are different. They do it a lot in sports. Of course, if you keep up with anything in sports, especially basketball, everybody wants to be compared to Michael Jordan. Are you as good as Michael Jordan? Are they as good as Michael Jordan? That's a big comparison. It may be a comparison. People love people do this all the time. It may be a comparison to a previous pastor. Right? I was thinking about this as I was sitting down there, and I don't know if you are like me. I grew up at a church where my pastor really liked to yell a whole lot. He was loud, and I loved it. Right? It was always exciting. And then I remember this one time I went to a funeral, and there was this fellow that was preaching, and boy, it was impressive. I don't know how he could sustain it, but he yelled the whole time. I mean, he was red, and I was like, my goodness, he's going to lose his vocal cords. And I grew up watching that and hearing it, and I was thinking, boy, I want to do that. Obviously, I don't do that. It's just not me, right? Could you imagine if I was sitting here shouting all the time? But the thing is, those types of comparisons don't necessarily work because people are different. We're all different. We have all these different things. But today we're going to look at a comparison. Because here's the thing. As much as we may compare ourselves to other people, and it's funny, if we compare ourselves to other people, don't we always compare ourselves to people we think are worse than us? I'm not as bad as them. I'm better at this than them. But how many people actually compare themselves to God? How many? Why? Because that brings humility and maybe fear. Probably fear. Why? Because we know we don't measure up to Him. And so today we look at these king comparisons. What we're going to be seeing is the calling of King Saul as he's beginning to come into running into Samuel and being anointed to be the king of Israel since they've asked for a king. But we're going to see how that compares to the one true king, the king that is our God. So follow along in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. And I told you we'll be bouncing around, but you'll see it if you follow along on the screen, I'll tell you. We're going to read the first 6 verses to begin with. It says this. Now there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Becharath, son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So Kish said to Saul his son, take one of the younger men with you and arise and go and look for the donkeys. And he passed through the hill country of Ephraim and passed through the land of Shalashah, but they did not find him. And they passed through the land of Shalim, but they were not there. Then they passed through the land of Benjamin, but did not find them. And when they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, come, let us go back, lest my father cease to care about the donkeys and become anxious about us. But he said to him, behold, there's a man of God in this city, and he is a man who is held in honor, and all that he says comes true. So now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us the way we should go. Then jump down to verse 15. Chapter 9, verse 15. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, tomorrow about this time I will send to you a man of Benjamin, a man from the land of Benjamin. And you shall anoint him to be prince over my people Israel. He shall save my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have seen my people, because their cry has come to me. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, here is the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who will restrain my people. Then Saul approached Samuel in the gate and said, tell me, where is the house of the seer? And Samuel answered Saul, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me. In the morning I will let you go, and I will tell you all that is on your mind. As for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not set your minds on them. For they have been found. And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you, for all your father's house? And then we're jumping down to chapter 10. Look at chapter 10, verse 1. Then Samuel took a flask of oil, and he poured it on his head, and he kissed him, and said, Has not the Lord anointed you to be prince over his people of Israel? And you shall reign over the people of the Lord, and you will save them from the hand of their surrounding enemies. And this shall be the sign to you that the Lord has anointed you to be prince over his heritage. When you depart from me today, you'll meet 2 men by Rachel's tomb in the territory of Benjamin, at Zezah. And they will say to you, the donkeys that you went to seek are found, and now your father has ceased to care about the donkeys and is anxious about you, saying, What shall I do about my son? Then you shall go on from there farther and come to the oak of Tabor. And 3 men going up to God at Bethel will meet you there, one carrying 3 young goats, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, another carrying a skin of wine. And they will greet you and give you 2 loaves of bread, which you shall accept from their hand. And after this you shall come to Gibeath Elohim, where there is a garrison of the Philistines. And there, as soon as you come to the city, you will meet a group of prophets coming down from the high place, with harp and tambourine, flute and lyre before them, prophesying. And then the Spirit of the Lord will rush upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and be turned into another man. And now when these signs meet you, do what your hands finds to do, for God is with you. And then our final jump is to verse 17 here in chapter 10. Now Samuel called the people together to the Lord at Mizpah. He said to the people of Israel, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I brought up Israel out of Egypt. I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, and from the hand of all the kingdoms that were oppressing you. But today you have rejected your God, who saves you from all your calamities and your distresses. And you said to him, Set a king over us. Now therefore present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and by your thousands. And Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel near, and the tribe of Benjamin was taken by lot. And he brought the tribe of Benjamin near by its clans, and the clan of the Matrites were taken by lot. And Saul the son of Kish was taken by lot. But when they sought him, he could not be found. So they inquired again of the Lord, Is there a man still to come? And the Lord said, Behold, he's hid himself among the baggage. And they ran and took him from there. And when he stood among the people, he was taller than any of the people from his shoulders upwards. And Samuel said to all the people, Do you see whom the Lord has chosen? There is none like him among all the people. And all the people shouted, Long live He. Let's pray. Father, as we approach your word, God, I pray you would speak to us through it. Would you give us ears to hear? It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. The first thing we see is that with man we have failing shepherds, but with God we have the sovereign shepherd. So I know we read a lot, so I'm going to summarize it real fast for you, and then I'll tell you how we break it up. In the very beginning, we talked about Saul being called, and in this calling, he is going after some donkeys. He lost his donkeys. He's going to search for the donkeys. He can't find the donkeys, and so what does he do? Well, he wants to quit. But his servant that's with him says, We need to go see this prophet. I've heard there's a seer in this town, and it was Samuel. And so they make their way to the town. We skipped over that. They got to the town, and Samuel had already been told what was going to happen. He'd been given a vision. He said, the Lord had spoke to him and said, A man's going to approach you outside the gate. And this is going to be the one who's going to be the next king of Israel that I'm giving to you. Because remember, if you remember from the last chapter, they had rejected God as their king. They had said, Give us a king like the nations. And so here in chapter 9 and 10, God's going to answer their request. Now, it's not going to be a good thing. He had warned them in the last chapter that if you get a king like the nations, he's going to be a king like the nations. He's going to rule over you. He's going to make your women and your men slaves and servants, and you're going to lose your land. You're going to get taxed. All these things are going to come. And they said, Give it to him anyway. Give it to us anyway. And so now they're going to get Saul. But Samuel is told that Saul's going to be coming. And so when he sees him, he immediately approaches him. He talks to him. He tells him he's going to come eat with him. In fact, we skipped that part, but they actually go up for a meal. And one of the neat things about that is Samuel trusted and believed God so much that he set aside some food for this man. He didn't even know who he was yet or that he was going to come into the picture, but he knew that God said he was. And so Samuel had the chef set aside some food for when Saul did show up at this feast. And so he ran into it. He said, Don't worry about your donkeys. They've already returned home. And then he begins to tell Saul all that he has for him. They go up to eat. In chapter 10, he anoints Saul, and he tells him he's going to be the next king. He's going to be the king of Israel. And so this is big news. He shows him 3 signs, and then Saul sort of goes home waiting for the time when they bring it all together, and that's what we read at the end. Samuel gets everybody together, and they begin to announce the king, and they can't find Saul. He's hiding in the back. Right? So that's the gist of the story that takes place over these 2 chapters. And at the end of chapter 10, we didn't read the final verses, but it actually says many people praised him, but there were some that didn't like him, and it makes a point to say, and he held his peace. Right? But we know Saul is just a man, and he's also going to be shown himself pretty soon to be a man who is pretty weak and failing, and he won't always hold his peace. Right? At this time, he's able to hold his tongue when people say they don't like him. Later, he's not going to do the same thing. But here, when I said the first point, is this. We see in the very beginning that with man we have failing shepherds, but with God we have the sovereign shepherd. In the last chapter, Israel asked for that king, just like the nation. And we begin to see him telling us a little bit about Saul. It tells us that he was a handsome young man, and there was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. Now that is an interesting description, right? It sounds like a good thing, right? It sounds like, man, this is the one you want running for the campaign. He's going to look good on camera and all this stuff. No, they didn't have cameras, right? But this is the presidential candidate we're talking about. That would be Saul. Right? He's going to look good on the screen. He looks like the person that fit the bill. But we know the Bible. And don't you know, like all the heroes of the Bible never really have these positive descriptions? It's always people who are known as not too great, David being the runt of the litter, Moses not being able to talk too well. They have all these things that make them not so great. So when it starts to describe Saul as this most handsome man, and then it says, from his shoulders upwards, he was taller than any of the people. Which is now, hey, that might be a sign of strength. But the thing is, when we read the Bible, we realize that oftentimes when God is talking about the pagan nations that surrounded Israel, they're always described as big, as tall. Right? Now that's not to say that Saul is one of them, but I think here it is starting to signify that, hey, even though this man looks like he may be great, something isn't quite adding up. He's handsome, he's tall. But is he really an answer? And we see that he gets described in this way, and then he goes after some donkeys. Okay? And so we think back to maybe like King David. Remember King David was tending the sheep, and he tells the story before he goes up against Goliath, because they said, you can't fight Goliath, and we'll get to that story in 1 Samuel. But he tells them, he says, I can fight Goliath. I've killed, lions and bears, everything that came after my sheep, I protected them. He was a good shepherd. Saul can't even keep up with some donkeys. The donkeys run away, and Saul goes out looking for them, and he can't track them down. It says he goes from this place, they weren't there, this place, they weren't there, this place, they weren't there. And the thing that I think is striking is that Saul is willing to quit. Aren't you glad that God didn't quit on you? Right, the reality is, a little bit of a side note, but I think it's a good side note, is that we strayed far, that in our sin we were far from God, and we're going to be grateful that God didn't quit on us, that he leaves the 99 to go after the one. But Saul, he's just ready to go home. He said, oh, well, I can't find them. Let's just give up. Forget the donkeys. My dad's probably worried about me now, so we need to go home. And it's telling that his servant has to be the spiritual. His servant knows about the prophet. Saul should have known about it, and he probably did, but he didn't think about it, he didn't trust it, he didn't believe in it. But the servant said, there's a seer in the next town. We need to go see him. He might be able to give us the answer. But yet we still see that Saul was failing at it. And then what happens? All of this shows that it was really part of God's plan. Yes, Saul still has his failures there, not being able to find the donkeys, but ultimately it leads him to Samuel. And God had been orchestrating all of this. They're going to come to you, Samuel. They're going to be looking for some donkeys. Tell them I done sent the donkeys home. They're fine. This man's going to be the king. And Samuel hears it. He sees him. He approaches him and tells him all of this. Now I love what Spurgeon says. He says this. He says, oh, on how small an incident the greatest results may hinge. The pivots of history microscopic. What does that mean? It means that God works in some of the smallest and most unusual ways that we might not even notice. But he does it in ways to work all things together for good and for His purposes. See, when we look at this picture we see here, we see Saul being a failing shepherd, but ultimately behind the scenes there was always God, the sovereign shepherd. When I think about this, I think about the story of Peter. When you read through the Gospels and you see Peter. Peter is like an up and down character, isn't he? We give Peter a hard time, but I wouldn't mind being him. He did a lot of great things. He was the first one to say, "This is the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said, "Man didn't reveal this to you. God revealed this to you." He walked on water. Yeah, he failed, but he walked on water, right? That's more than any of us can say. Any of us that are done here for a second? Yes, we didn't look at the waves. We would do the same thing. In fact, we probably would never got out of the boat, but he walked on water. He was there for lots of things. Even when he shouldn't have cut the guy's ear off when they come to get Jesus, that was a pretty cool thing to do, wasn't it? Wouldn't you want anything too? I'm going to take up for Jesus. But he didn't understand the purposes of everything, and Jesus tells him, stops him, fixes the man's ear. But still, I think we probably all got a lot of Peter in us, right? That being said, Peter failed pretty tremendously, right? He rejected the Lord, denied Him 3 times, and ran off crying. In Peter, we have somebody who runs off their emotions, energetic, but often running without direction. They get up to the Mount of Transfiguration. He's up there trying to set up stones and stuff, failing to stop and just realize that he's in the presence of God in all His glory. Right? He was just somebody who immediately did his instincts, and then he had this big failure of denying Christ. And yet, God is the sovereign one who rescues him from that, restores him. Remember, that happens after he raises from the dead. Jesus rises from the dead. He sees Peter fishing. He goes out there and he feeds him. And he says, "Tend my sheep, feed my sheep, tend my sheep." He restores Peter, and Peter becomes the apostle in Jerusalem. The leader, one of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. He was the first to reach out to the Gentiles. We get to Acts chapter 10. This Jew who had his problems as a Jew, you read through Galatians, he was pretty bold in his ethnicity, but yet he's the first one to go out and go get Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. And then you see him actually all the way through the end of his life. Of course, we don't have it in the scriptures, but we know through tradition that Peter was crucified, and he crucified upside down. Right? So it's not to look like so he didn't feel worthy of being crucified in the same way as the Savior. That's a strong way to end. But what's that a picture of? It's a picture of somebody who ain't that great, but God uses his failures to strengthen him and make an awesome picture out of it. See, with man, we have failing shepherds, but with God, we have the sovereign shepherd. I am a failing shepherd. As much as I wish it wasn't true, it inevitably is. The reason is because I necessarily do something wrong from a human perspective, right? The reason is, you'll catch this, because I'm human. And there's only been one that was perfect, that was Jesus. And so if you try your hardest, and this is true for any pastor, but I'll pick on myself. If you try your hardest to follow me and me alone completely, then you're going to be gravely disappointed. Why? Because I'll let you down. Now, hopefully you can and will follow me regularly as we follow the Lord, but apart from Him and His purposes, I don't really have anything to offer. And the thing is, even if I was loyal, even all the way to the point of death, I would have nothing to offer you beyond the grave. Because I'm not the one to follow. We follow the sovereign shepherd. We follow the one who's behind it all. That this role we have, and each and every one of us is called to be witnesses to the Lord. But when we witness to people, when we tell them about Jesus, it shouldn't be about how great we are, but it's always about how great He is. When we read the Old Testament, the point we want to see over and over again, and we even see it with David. David is the one that should be lifted up as one of the best kings, even though we know he had his failures. Saul, he ain't going to have that much of a high life, right? It's going to turn pretty quickly, and Saul's going to get out of the picture. But even Saul and David, all of these guys, we never look at them and think, they're the heroes. They're never the heroes. God is always the hero. And when we witness and we tell people about Christ, what we ultimately do is point through us to Him. And we try to leave out all those imperfections in ourselves because we are imperfect. But ultimately, there's a God who's in charge. He was orchestrating things in the way that only He can. And so the key here, we have to make sure that we're following the right King. He's the one who's worth it. This is why churches are not or should not be built on any pastor or personality. Why? Because they're fickle. The faith we have is an ancient one. And it's grounded in something way better than charisma. It's grounded in the fact that our God came and took on flesh, that He lived a perfect life, that He died, was buried, rose from the dead, and that He ascended to the Father, and that He's alive right now, ever making intercession for us. That we trust in the crucified and the risen one, so that no matter who it is, if it's me at times being soft-spoken, or it's the guy yelling the whole time, or it's the guy that uses some sort of graphic, doesn't matter who's speaking, doesn't matter how you do it. You might not be very confident in your words. I think it's funny. I had a wedding this weekend, and some of the people that think they just can't speak and they're not that confident, they don't realize that when they do, even though what they say might not seem great, it's the best. I'll tell you what I mean. I have a cousin, and my cousin is, the first cousin is actually the dad of the son. My second cousin was married. Well, I think it's first cousin once removed, and then second cousin. But anyways, he was going to get married. The dad was there, and so he was at the rehearsal dinner. And at the rehearsal dinner, that whole family, they ain't real fond of public speaking. Y'all like public speaking? Anyway, they ain't real fond of public speaking, and they were supposed to give a speech, and his brother was the best man, and he got out of it. First of all, he did it at the rehearsal dinner, and I said, you cheated. You're supposed to give a speech at the reception when everybody's here. Right? These people don't matter, right? We all know one another. But you got to get all those people you don't know and look at them and give a speech. And then he didn't even give a speech, he recorded it. So I got on to him, I said, you cheater, he made a video of it. And then his dad was sitting there with me, and I'd already been picking on him. I said, you don't give a speech, right? He said, no, I ain't. I said, I'm going to make you. I'm going to hit that thing with a glass and say, speech. I didn't have to. He got up. He said, I'll do it. And he didn't say much. Right? But he almost broke down in tears. He said, I don't always do this, but I want you both to know that I love you and I got your back. He sat down. That was the most powerful thing you could have said. He didn't think that he was the one that could say anything. The same is true for each and every one of us. Y'all, it ain't what we say as much as how we say it and who we point it to. We want to point them to God, the one who is behind everything, the one who is ultimately worthy of all the glory, not us. But then not only see that, we see with man we have dependency, but with God we have deliverance. So when Saul runs into Samuel, he dines with him. And I told you he was so certain that God would do what he said, that he had the cook set aside a special meal for Saul before he even knew who Saul was. And then in chapter 10, we see Samuel anoint Saul, and it's not public yet, it's just between Samuel and Saul, but this is an important moment. First, it's noteworthy, I think, that Samuel calls Saul a prince, not a king. The Hebrew word melech, which means king, was available, but Samuel didn't use it. I think it's probably because Samuel knew the true king. It's always God. There's never going to be anybody that usurps that or takes his place. However, he gives Saul 3 signs of confirmation. That was kind of a weird section, isn't it? But it's what happens. He says, Saul, here's going to be the thing that confirms to you everything I've told you. First, when you make your way, you're going to run into some fellas. They're going to tell you that the donkeys have returned and your father's worried about you. This was a sign that God was going to take care of him. And then he's going to run into some priests and some prophets, and they're going to be bringing sacrifices. They're going to have bread, and they're going to give you some. And this is going to be a sign that God will be providing for them. And then he says, when you enter into the city, the Spirit of God is going to come upon you. And this is weird, because Saul's not the spiritual one. Right? He wasn't even willing to seek out Samuel. He didn't know about it. But yet, the Spirit's going to come upon Saul, and Saul's going to begin to prophesy. And it's going to say, you're going to be like a new man. You're going to look completely different when you do this. And this was going to be a sign that not only was God going to take care of him, he was going to provide for him, but he was also going to be the strength that Saul needed for what he had to do. He said, when all this comes upon you, trust the work of your hands, knowing that God is with you. Now, all of these signs are neat, but one thing should be clear, that Saul was completely dependent upon the deliverance that only God can provide. We live in a time, and I've spent this time, it's probably just part of human nature, but we see it all the time. People love the idea of being able to say they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. You ever heard that statement before? Who was the British guy was, I think, one famous for saying that during World War II. You know what I'm talking about? Made a whole movie about it. Anyways, Churchill, yeah, Winston Churchill, there we go. Anyway, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. At least he's famous for saying that. And we love that idea, these people that said, you know, I didn't need any help. I made my way all by myself, right? I made my living all by myself. I got where I am all by myself. Can I just tell you right now, malarkey. Now, I know what they mean when they say that. What they mean is life wasn't handed to them. What they mean is that they didn't just get everything on a silver platter, that they did have to work for it. But you know as well as I do that even if you work for it, boy, people come along in your life that bless you when you're not even expecting it. And if it wasn't for people like that, we wouldn't be where we are. And no matter how hard we work, no matter what we do, it may be because you gained favor, because you were a person of integrity and trustworthy, and so that person began to trust you, and they begin to give you more responsibility, and to teach you what they know. But the reality is you still need them. Right? We're dependent. Nobody really makes it on their own. And as self-sufficient as we want to be and say, I can do it on my own, I don't need anybody, we need people. We need people. We need people to be there for us when we're thinking crazy and they can talk us off our ledge. We need people to be there for us when we have dumb ideas and tell us they're dumb ideas. Right? We need people. We need people to guide us and show us. Boy, I've had to call many of you just for help in my house. Whether it's Gary or Lance or somebody with something wrong with the car, Lance is going to block my number every time I call him for something with the vehicle. Right? And all that stuff is because I need them. And I don't know what I'm doing. And the thing is, I'm dependent. But the reality is when we trust in man, we're only trusting someone equal to ourselves, and we are trusting somebody who is dependent, not independent. The fact is, we need God. Without Him, I'm sure of this, without Him, I would be a mess. Now, the world might not think so. I could probably paint a pretty good picture on Facebook. But without God, my morals may be skewed. My integrity may be lacking. And there's all these things in me I'm really fearful of when I think I'm thankful that the Lord saved me, because I fear how ugly my heart could make me go apart from God, who changed me to be anymore. I praise the Lord that He reversed the disease in me. He saved me and changed me. He broke the chains and made it possible for me to live for Him. And you need to make sure you're following the one with the real power. God is the deliverer. He protects, He provides, He strengthens, and man simply serves as a testimony to that fact. When we look at Saul, we're looking at a man who was the handsome and the tallest, but the reality is he was completely dependent upon the fact that God called him and confirmed it, and if God stopped confirming it or didn't call him, then he was going to be another failure. Because ultimately, God is the one that is the strength. And then finally, we say with man we have fear, but with God we have faithfulness. Now the time finally came to be publicly proclaimed as king, and the people gathered together at Mizpah. Now this is a detail that you probably don't remember, but it was at Mizpah where all the people had that awesome time of repentance. They truly repented. They turned back to God. They beat the Philistines, and it wouldn't have been far from here where Samuel set up the stone that was the Ebenezer, the sign that God was with them. And he brings them back to the very same place and tells them, this was the place where you repented and trusted God. Now I'm bringing you here to say, don't forget on this day you rejected the Lord your God as king. He says, He brought you out of Egypt, but you rejected Him. And Samuel's being pretty rough on him, as he should have been. He says, you rejected Him, but He's here. He still answered your request, and He's going to give you the king you asked for. And so they begin to cast lots, and it nearly whittles it down, until it lands on Saul, and he ain't nowhere to be found. So I said, maybe there's another man. And Samuel says, no, this is the one. Hold on. And the Lord says, he's hiding in the baggage. Now, there's two ways you can look at this. I've already quoted Spurgeon. I'll tell you what he thought. He thought that this was a sign of Saul's humility. Right? That Saul was being humble and he didn't want to accept this awesome task, and so he was hiding the baggage. And he makes the point, because we know Saul fails, right? I'm not spoiling that for anybody. Right? You know, David comes, and Saul ultimately is a failure. And so he says that even some of the people that start off the best can end the worst. And I think that's a good point, but I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't think what Saul has is humility. I think he has fear. He's terrified of the responsibility that he already knows he's supposed to have. Here's the thing. If God has called you to do something, and He's asked you to do it, He's pulled you out, hiding from that responsibility in humility is disobedience. And Saul here was being disobedient. He was being fearful of the responsibility that God gave him. And they had to pull him out of the baggage. And I can just imagine, it doesn't tell us here, but if I was Samuel, I'd be embarrassed. Where's the king at? He's the guy over there hiding the baggage. Hold on. And then he had to talk about, hey, look how tall he is. Look how handsome he is. Long live the king. And everybody shouts and they're excited for him. But the fact is that he starts this thing off even trying to run from his responsibilities. But with God, we have faithfulness. Saul may have tried to hide from his role, but even through his rejection, God would never hide from His responsibility. He would still be there for His people. In the Gospels, Jesus tells a story about hired hands. You remember this? He says, if you have the hired hands looking over your sheep, what are they going to do when trouble comes? Run. They only care about themselves. Right? They don't care about the sheep. They're hired hands. They have nothing invested in it. And so if it's just the money that they're going to lose, they're like, forget this. I'm not going to give my life. I'm not going to risk my life fighting for these sheep. He says they will run off and leave the sheep. He said, but the true shepherd, the good shepherd, stays with the sheep. That he watches over and protects them. He stands and fights for them. He searches after the one that's lost. He says, that's the true shepherd. That's not the hired hand. And when Jesus is saying that, He's showing us that He's the good shepherd. That He's the one that never leaves us nor forsakes us. That He's the one that fights for us, that takes care of us, that searches after us when we run away. And all of this isn't the hired hand. So when we trust in man, you have a fearful leader who will likely abandon you at some point when things get hard. But God is always there. He never leaves us nor forsakes us. These kings just don't compare to one another. And they don't today either. This is why we have a focused faith, and we need to make sure that we don't fall into celebrity worship. And y'all might not be as privy to this, or it might not be as something you're inclined to, but in my world, I hear about pastors all the time, especially the really famous ones. The guy that wrote a book, the guy that was speaking at such and such a conference, and they pop up everywhere. Some of these guys pop up at conferences so much, I just don't know how they actually stay at the church they're at. But that's me, and I love them. They're great. They're good guys. But what happens so often is that they go up, 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 up. And then we hear about a moral failure. We hear a headline that they completely lost their faith. And you have all those people that were just following those celebrities. And this is really just a problem with our culture. Everybody can post something on the internet and become famous. And everything becomes widespread. And I'm not saying not to listen to popular guys. I do. I told you I do. I like them. Many of them are good for the right reasons. But what we need to realize is that they're never the objects of our worship. It's always the God that's behind them. There's a reason John the Baptist said, let me decrease that you may increase. The best role our life can play is to point people to the life-giver. Are you trusting the right king? And are you pointing people towards him or towards yourself? Saul didn't compare to the true king. You need to make sure you're following him. Now, in this story, we do see Saul. He's going to be anointed. He becomes the king. And even though things started off a little rocky, it was still God's purpose that Saul was going to be king. And like many people, he too has his ups and downs. Now, when you read it, he's got a lot more downs than he has ups. But he has some ups. What we need to realize is that, that's the life we live. We live a life that is riddled with sin, riddled with distractions. All these things come into us. And our Christian lives, as much as we try, we got to trust in God for His strength, because it can be, as we said before, like this. Well, we want more peaks than we do valleys, but we fail. if you don't get anything, I know I've repeated it a lot, but I think the point's pretty simple as I've been reading through this text. Constantly remember that our focus, that our worship, that our trust always needs to be in God and God alone. He's the only place that you can place your faith, place your hope, and not be disappointed. You can't place it in me or your favorite pastor. Because here's the thing, I don't plan on failing. I don't want to. And I might not, from a worldly standpoint anyways, or anything big. I might not fail you. We might argue over carpet color or something. I ain't a failure. But I'm saying, I don't want to, but still the point remains that I have nothing to offer you beyond the grave. But God. And nobody does. Not your grandma, your grandpa, the person that you look up to all in the world. They may be great examples. The only one that can give you eternal life and eternal hope and eternal rest and peace that surpasses all understanding. My mama's here today. I love my mama, and I tell her, here recently she ain't been so good about it. She made me worry about something. But I used to always call her when I was worried about something, and she might be genuinely worried, but she would at least tell me, you're going to be all right. And I'm like, that's all right, lie to me. Right? Lie to me. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel peace, and I'm happy, and I can go on just living in denial. But she can't give me the peace that surpasses all understanding. Only God can.